Have you noticed how tidy my table is? Only the things I really need and everything has its own specific place. If you would like to have that in your entire home, maybe Marie Kondo can help you with her book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying. And today we're going to have a look at that. Welcome to the Soft Skills channel. My name is Sebastian Jung and I welcome you to another book review. Today we're going to have a look at Marie Kondo's The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying. Now, Marie Kondo is quite a well-known expert for tidying. She has her own method called the KonMari method, which is just a play of words on her name. In Japanese, you say the family name first, so it's Kondo Marie, and KonMari is an abbreviation, a short form of that. And the KonMari method has been quite popular in recent years. There have been several books, and there has also been a Netflix series with at least 2 seasons. So it has been quite popular. And today we're going to have a look at the book that started it all, Marie Kondo's first book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying, which is, as far as I can tell, a pretty literal translation of the Japanese title, Jinsei ga Tokimeku Katasuke no Maho. The book is divided into 5 main chapters, and we will have a look at those. In the first chapter, Marie Kondo asks us, why can't we keep our homes in order? And the answer is, nobody teaches us how to do it. In Japan and in America, you at least have something like, what is it called? Some housekeeping classes at school where you learn basic cooking and some household basics. But even there, you don't learn how to tidy. Even though we have to take care of our home for our entire lives, we never really get taught how to do it. Marie Kondo was interested in the topic from quite an early age. She says she started at age 5 to read women's magazines and household magazines and was quite interested in the topic, and she started tidying her room and her siblings' room and the entire home and the school and whatnot. And she describes the development she went through. At first, she just tried to tidy by arranging, by putting things in the right place, closet Tetris, as you probably do it yourself. But she noticed this doesn't really work out. And the first great insight came thanks to an American author she read a book from, and that was that you need to start by discarding things, that you need to declutter to get rid of things you don't need. And only then you have a chance at getting this whole tidying business to work out. And the second big insight was that things will not work out if you try to do it in a lot of tiny steps, a little a day, this room today and the next room sometime else, but that you need to do it in one big, great, special event, one major undertaking, and then it will really work out and you will have lasting success. She also noticed that tidying does not just bring our homes in order, but it has a positive influence on our lives as a whole. So at this point we are quite motivated and want to know how to do it, and she tells us in the following chapters. The second chapter is primarily about discarding. So we know there has to be this great big major tidying event. But how does it actually work? Now, there are basically just two steps. The first step is discarding, and the second step is figuring out where to store things. Now, it's quite important that we do the discarding first and that we always finish the discarding before we start storing things. This is quite important. Marie Kondo tells us that this great big tidying event will change our consciousness, because if we go through with it, we will for the first time really experience what a tidy home is like, how it is to live in a tidy home. And this experience will change our consciousness, will change our mindset, and this will enable us to have lasting success, to stick to the tidy home. So, we need to discard, but how do we decide what to get rid of? Marie Kondo has a simple method here. You probably heard of it before. You take each individual item into your hands, and then you ask yourself, does it spark joy? Do I feel joy when I hold this item? Do I want this item to stay with me for the continuation of my life? And if it does spark joy, you keep it, and if it does not, you discard it. Now, this doesn't mean that you totally hate all those items you discard. Maybe there is, let's say, a piece of clothing that you really liked to wear for a long time and you enjoyed it and had fun with it, but now it doesn't look good anymore. Maybe it doesn't fit anymore. Maybe your style has changed, so for some reason you don't wear it anymore, and you can take it into your hand and you can say, oh, we had a great time together. Thanks for this great time. But now the time has come to part, and discard it with a positive feeling. And of course, common sense still applies, so you better not say, oh, I hate all those video conference meetings, in the trash goes the stupid webcam. Better don't do that. Now, this should be clear. One important thing is that we tidy by category and not by location. So we don't say, oh, well, sleeping room today, living room tomorrow, but we say clothing first, then books, and so on. And the reason for that is that we often store the same kind of item in plenty of different places. We might have plenty of books in the living room, in some cupboard, but maybe there are some rooms in our bedroom because we like to read before we go to sleep. Maybe there is one in the bathroom. Maybe there is a book where we work because we had to look something up. So they are scattered everywhere. So if we tidy by category, this is our only chance to really get all items of one category at one time and really deal with them. Marie Kondo has a simple order, a simple way to categorize, and this is clothes, then books, then papers, then miscellaneous items, and then things with sentimental value. And you probably notice this is an order from easy to difficult, where the most difficult items, the ones with sentimental qualities, come last. So how do we deal with those categories and with the items in them? This is what the third chapter is about, and the third chapter is for that reason also the longest in the book. Marie Kondo emphasizes that tidying can be quite fun and quite a beautiful experience. If we deal with our things, we also deal with ourselves, because our things are part of us, are our personal history. And this can be quite fun and nice. And also, since we start with the easy categories, we will get practice and get routine, and so we can better deal with the more difficult categories that come later. So, first we start with our clothing. And the first step is that we gather all of them, no matter where in the house they are kept. We collect all of our clothing and put it on one big giant pile. We really get everything, no matter where it is. If we discover some clothing at a later point that we didn't think of, we will immediately discard it. If it would have been important, we would have remembered it in the first place. So everything goes on one big pile. And then we start sorting out. We go through it by subcategories. Marie Kondo provides some here, but we don't need to go in that much detail. And then we sort things out. We start discarding. And Marie Kondo gives plenty of advice for that. For example, she says we should not try to degrade old clothing to loungewear, to say, oh, this doesn't look good enough anymore to wear outside, but I can still wear it at home. This will only work in a few cases where this clothing really is comfortable and we really like to wear it, and otherwise this is just an excuse not to throw things away. We shouldn't fall for that. We should throw them away. In this part of the book, Marie Kondo also explains how to fold clothes properly. She has her own specific way of folding that you might have heard of before or maybe seen before. She folds clothing rather tightly in a way so that it can be placed upright in your cupboard or wherever. And this is a general advice she gives that also reappears in later chapters. We should not stack any things on top of each other. She says this is a bad idea. The things at the bottom will suffer from the weight and they will also be forgotten. We will never use them because they are so cumbersome to access. We should always store our things upright next to each other and not on top of each other. I find this a bit difficult. Now it depends probably on the culture, but here in Germany the typical furniture is built in a way that encourages piling things. So you have a lot of room above, but you don't have that much space. For example, the typical cupboards we use for storing clothes have a very few they don't have much space to store things vertically. So this might be a little problem there. The second category we deal with are books. And again, we get all of them together and place them all on a big pile. Yeah, they might be heavy, but we still have to do it. And you might think you have a good overview if they are stored in some bookcase, but no, they all go on the pile. And again, we discard. And we are quite merciless here. Marie Kondo says, all of those books you have where you tell yourself, oh, I will read them at some point. No, you won't. Discard them. And you will also have probably plenty of books where you say, oh yeah, I read them and maybe I will read them again in the future. No, you won't. Discard those as well. And what's left is your personal Hall of Fame, your very favorites, your favorite books, and she says that is quite enough. Marie Kondo did some experiments with keeping the best parts of books that weren't that great overall. She tried using a notebook and then writing down the best passages, but that took way too much time. She tried making photocopies, but that took too much time as well. In the end, she just tore out the pages that had the good sections, but even then she noticed she never looked at them again. So you really can discard all those books. You will not miss them. Next up are papers. And here Marie Kondo pretty much says throw them all away. They will never spark joy anyways. This is my favorite section of the book because I totally agree. Unfortunately, there are some papers, some documents we have to keep for various reasons. Some might be in use, such as an invoice we still have to pay or some form we need to submit. Then there might be some documents we have to keep for a certain time, such as documents related to a vacation we are going to take. And there are some documents we need to keep forever. In Germany, for example, we have to keep documents that are related to retirement indefinitely. So yeah, we can't get out of that, unfortunately. For those documents we can't avoid, we can't get rid of, Marie Kondo advises us to store them in as simple a way as possible, not to make it too complicated, not to have too many categories and whatnot, but to keep it really simple. And all the papers and documents that don't belong to the aforementioned categories, those should be mercilessly thrown away. Marie Kondo gives a couple of examples. One that was funny for me personally was documents from workshops, from seminars, because when I hold courses, hold seminars, the first thing participants will ask is, oh, do we get any script, any text, handouts? Can we have a copy of the PowerPoint and whatnot? And they store everything they can get a hold on, and they are quite diligent about that. But I know from the very beginning they will never look at that stuff again. If you have any documents from university, school, from your earlier education, whatnot, throw them away. You will never look at them. Then we have the miscellaneous items, the category that includes everything else. Marie Kondo provides a list of subcategories here, but we don't need to delve into that. She also doesn't provide details on each one, but she gives them some general advice that applies to various categories. For example, she says we should get rid of gifts that we don't actually use. You might have some of that you keep out of some kind of guilty conscience, but she says this item has fulfilled its purpose when we received it, when we were happy to receive it, and we're happy about them, and now their purpose is finished and they can be discarded. She also encourages us to throw away packaging. She says some people keep the original packaging, for example, of electronic devices, because they think if they will sell them later on, then they will get a higher price if they can include the original packaging. However, this is a miscalculation in her eyes, because all the time we keep that packaging, we basically pay rent for it, so we pay more than we gain in the end. We should throw all of that packaging away. And we should also throw away all of those unidentified cables. You know what I'm talking about. Those cables where you don't recall what device they belong to, and the device is probably long gone, but they still are somewhere, and we should throw them away. We will never use them. We don't even know where we could use them, so discard those. Last is the most difficult category, the things with sentimental value. Those are most difficult to discard, but we should still do so in a lot of cases. Marie Kondo emphasizes that the memory will prevail even if we discard the item. The experience has taken place. The item has fulfilled its purpose. We can now part with it and discard it. I guess here it is especially a big advantage to place everything on one big pile, as Marie Kondo tells us to, because then we will be able to see that maybe we have a plenty of things to remember, this one great vacation or this one person that passed away or whatever, and then maybe we can select our very favorite item out of all of those and discard the rest. The last thing we deal with are photographs, and here again Marie Kondo says we should take each one into our hands and see if it sparks joy. If we have an album with photos in it, we should take each photo out of that album and take it into our hands. Now this probably doesn't apply anymore to a lot of you because all your photos are now stored digitally, but if you still have a lot of actual photos, then this will be a piece of work probably. So we discard. And Marie Kondo says if we go through with that, if we discard all the things we don't need, the things that don't spark joy, there will be a point where we have an aha moment, where something clicks, where we say, this is exactly the right amount of things that I really need. It doesn't have to be a very, very small amount. So maybe if you love shoes, maybe 30 pairs of shoes will be the right amount for you. If you collect something, maybe you still will have a somewhat big collection of things, but it will be exactly the right amount for you. And once that has happened, once this click, this aha has occurred, it will be easier for you to stick to this right amount without having your home get crowded and cluttered again. Marie Kondo says that it might be a bit strange for us at first to listen to our feelings, to our intuition, to ask ourselves, does it spark joy, to wait for this aha moment? But she says this is exactly the reason why her method works. Now, other people, other teachers of tidying might have models that are way more specific, that tell us, oh, this is the right number of books to have, and this is the right number for this type of clothing and whatnot. But of course, those values, they probably work for the person who created the method, but they won't work for every single person who tries to apply the method. But if we listen to our intuition, to our feelings, then we will be able to figure out the amount of things that is right for us. So now that we have done a lot of discarding and decluttering, we have the things that are left and that need to be stored. And this is what the fourth chapter is about. In this chapter, Marie Kondo describes her usual routine when she comes home. How she empties her handbag, how she changes into comfortable clothing, and so on. And the important aspect here is that in her home, every item has its own specific place. And this is the goal we should aim for as well. Every item in our home should have its own specific place. After we have discarded things, sorted things out, this should be much easier because we might be left with a mere third or quarter of the belongings we had before. Marie Kondo emphasizes that storage should be as simple as possible. Now, there are, of course, smart and sophisticated storage solutions that try to make the best use of limited space, but she says those often actually have an adverse effect, because we forget about things that are hidden somewhere in some complicated storage solution, and she says we should keep things simple. She herself only uses very basic means, such as boxes, shoe boxes she likes to use a lot, or maybe some simple drawers, boxes with drawers. This is all we really need. And there are also merely two simple basic rules we need to consider. First of all, each category of items should be stored together. We should have all our clothing in one place, all our books in one place, and so on. We can use the categories we used when tidying before, but we can also use more general categories, such as papery things, clothy things, electrical things, whatnot. So we should keep it really simple. And the second rule is that storage space should not be scattered. And this is important if we have more than one person in the household. If there are multiple people living together, each person should have their own storage space, and this should not be divided or scattered. So it should not be scattered across multiple room, furniture, pieces, whatever. Now this I found a bit difficult. It is not described in a lot of detail as I understood it. Things should first be sorted by person, then by category. So in our situations, my girlfriend and myself, we are two people living in one apartment. So for example, we have all our clothes in a closet in our bedroom, and this would be wrong, as I understand Marie Kondo here. Only one of us should use the bedroom for storage, and so the other person would end up storing the clothing in the living room or wherever, which I find strange. But as I said, it's not described in a lot of detail, so I might have misunderstood. One last important point Marie Kondo makes in this chapter is that we should appreciate our possessions. She herself always thanks her items when she has used them and puts them away. So at this point we've gone through with this one major big tidying event. We finally tidied our home, great success, and we have one final chapter left, the 5th, and here Marie Kondo talks about the positive effect tidying our home can have. She says that even though she started at such an early age 5, to be interested in the topic, she only realized rather late in her life that this is really what she wanted to do, that this is what she wanted to base her professional career on, and that this is the essential topic of her life. And she says a lot of her clients have similar problems. They don't really know what to do with their lives, and often tidying helps them realize it. For example, there was one client, a woman, who had decluttered her bookcase, and she had discarded all of those books that, for example, she bought because of her work, but she didn't actually like, and she threw all of those away. And then she noticed that all the books that were left that really sparked joy were all about social welfare. And this is when she realized, oh, this is the topic I want my life to be about, and this is the topic I want to base my professional career on. And so she quit her job and started taking on a new profession. And this, according to Marie Kondo, has already happened a couple of times, that people, after tidying and decluttering, suddenly quit their job and took on a new professional direction. As I said before, by dealing with our things, we essentially deal with ourselves, and we might learn new things about ourselves, and it might even help us realize what we really want. Marie Kondo says we might even lose weight. So basically the body says, oh, if now it is decluttering time, I will do so as well. Something like that. You better don't put too much hope into that, I'd say. Yeah, but she says it happened for some of her clients. What is easier for me to accept is that by decluttering, we learn and we train important skills that are useful in our lives overall, such as letting go of things or making decisions. Marie Kondo says there are two main reasons why we have difficulties parting with things. One is an attachment to the past. Oh, I got this item on this occasion and I had it for so long, I can't part with it. And the other is a fear of the future. Now, I might end up needing such an item and then I won't have it and it will cause problems and whatnot. And those two issues, attachment to the past, fear of the future, they occur all the time in our lives. And so it is useful if by tidying we get some training in dealing with them. At the very end, Marie Kondo emphasizes that tidying is only the first step, of course. Our real life starts afterwards, but it is a good first step and a good start. So let's proceed to the critique. Now, tidying is a somewhat trivial topic, and you might say, oh, well, I don't need a book for that. This isn't that important. But I think it does make sense to consciously deal with those things, those topics that are usually overlooked, that are somewhat casual and seemingly unimportant, to really put them into focus, pay some attention, and try to really do them right. So this makes sense for me. And I also find the KonMari method plausible, comprehensible. I do like that it is very simple and easy to do. This is a big advantage from my point of view. And I do accept this idea that we need this one big major undertaking, this one special event. I think the reasoning behind it makes sense for me. I can't really tell you how well it works. Now, Marie Kondo, of course, has plenty of fans who swear on the method, but I haven't done this big tidying event myself, so I can't tell you from my own experience how good it works. There are some smaller weaknesses that we encountered. This rule not to divide storage space, to have one continuous storage space for each person. That is a bit weird, but as I said, I might have understood that. And not stacking things up might be a bit difficult, depending on the way your furniture is made, but those are minor points from my point of view. One thing I didn't like so much is that when Marie Kondo talks about decluttering, she always talks about discarding, about throwing things away. And now, especially if we sort things out that are not broken in any way, that are still good, still usable, we should, of course, focus on selling them, giving them away, recycling them in some way, in favor of the environment and sustainability. The book sometimes has a tendency towards perfectionism. The goal is clearly our ideal home, and if we have difficulties visualizing our ideal home, Marie Kondo suggests reading home magazines and maybe visiting model homes. And I find this a bit strange, because what you see there is sterile and artificial. living space, not real spaces people actually live in. So this might give you a bit of strange ideas. The book is quite easy, comfortable to read, easy to comprehend. It is fun to read. So this is quite nice. One small exception, the description on how to fold clothing. I found difficult to understand. It really was just described as text. I would have liked some pictures there. This would have made things way easier. But overall, it is fun to read. What might be a bit strange, a bit unusual for you at first, is that Marie Kondo often treats items, belongings, as if they were alive. She says we should empty our handbag after using it, so it has a chance to relax and recover when she visits clients' homes. Before she starts tidying, she will kneel in the middle of the room and greet the house to make it help with the tidying and things like that. This might be a bit strange at first. Now, we can argue about whether this is some typical Japanese thing related to Shintoism or whatnot. But I'd say the bottom line is that it makes sense to have some respect for your things and to treat them well. And also this idea of gratitude, of being thankful to your things for the services they offer, something like that. This isn't probably such a bad idea, because gratitude in general is regarded as useful and healthy and whatnot. So bottom line is, I'd say I recommend the book if your home is somewhat chaotic and you'd like to really get a grip on it and to really tidy it up. Then I'd say this approach is certainly worth trying. But before you start cleaning up your home now, I would be quite happy if you take a moment to click the like button and maybe subscribe to the channel. This does spark a lot of joy for me. We will see each other again next week. For today, I'll take my leave. Have a nice day. See you next time.